So the foraging update is here on Alpha, of course, and honestly, it's really good. I was saying that it's going to be really difficult for them to meet expectations, and to be honest, I think they've probably met expectations in terms of foraging and then hunting. But for me, and it seems like a lot of other people, there's one glaring issue that kind of seems almost like a doomsday situation. Almost like a bit of a self-destruct button. And it doesn't even revolve around foraging per se, it actually relates to attributes. Now, there was a lot of speculation as to how Hypixel was going to change attributes and implement this new attribute menu while taking attributes off armor in a traditional way, whereby kind of negates god rolls. And the big question always used to be, how are they going to compensate those players who had those god roll sets? Well, it's clear that the attributes don't go to waste because, you know, if you have a good set of Crimson with Magic Find and Veteran on, for instance, you're probably laughing considering, you know, you're going to end up with Magic Find 10 and Veteran 10. Yeah, overall you take a little bit of a hit because you actually don't get as much Magic Find or Veteran as you would have on a 10-10 piece. Or a 10-10 set, should I say. For instance here, Veteran 10, you get in 7.5 Combat Wisdom. I believe that actually might be the same as just one singular piece. And the same also goes for Magic Find. Now, while I am actually quite a fan of this new attribute menu sort of situation, like I like it, all of these attributes are passive, they're no longer on pieces of armor, all of these run simultaneously, and there's a ton of different attributes that are actually in a completely different style to they were before, considering majority of these are not actually so vague but more specific. For instance, this one here gives you, says that your axes deal whatever % extra damage to creatures on Galatea. So it's not just creatures everywhere, they are specific, and to be honest I quite like that. It's quite cool, it's unique, it's much different than what we had before. Now the obvious issue is not when it comes to just, you know, random pieces of maybe Veteran 5 armor, it's when people have spent billion coins on god roll sets. The admins always promised that we would be reimbursed and, you know, it would basically be made amends with to a point where we wouldn't even have to question it. But the way that it is going to happen, or how it's meant to happen right now, before any changes, is pretty interesting and we really need to discuss it. But just before we get into it, at the moment we're actually trying to beat the population of Andorra with subscribers. The population of Andorra is around about 80,000 people. And once we reach 80,000 subscribers, we'll actually be visiting Andorra and we'll be able to claim that we have more subscribers in the population of the whole country, which would be pretty cool. So make sure to subscribe to make that happen. Also, if you are planning on purchasing anything from the Hypixel store, make sure to use code NITROS, it gets yourself 5% off. You should join the Discord server, it's linked in the description of this video. We offer Slayers and Dungeon carries, so if you need carries or want to carry and make some coins, make sure to join. Now, for those of you who don't know, just ignore the state of my inventory. You can get god rolls, you can get god rolls currently on the regular server, but after this update drops, god rolls will be a thing of the past. A god roll is basically just two perfect rolls that fit together on a piece of armor, a piece of equipment, and, well, maybe a weapon too. Now, the way that you obtain this roll is, well, you could go down the Wheel of Fate route, or you could try your luck at Kuudra opening chests, and that's how majority of these god rolls are obtained. And that is why Kuudra, you know, is so profitable. The god rolls, the different rolls on pieces of armor. Now, of course, with this attribute menu situation, all rolls are being removed off individual armor pieces or weapons or pieces of equipment. Therefore, this is completely obsolete. So my first question was, well, how do they solve that in Kuudra? Because, you know, the main money-making method in Kuudra is hoping for those god rolls. And without those god rolls, it seems like the money-making method would be dead. Well, you can actually basically just drop shards now. Shards with different attributes on. And also clean pieces of Crimson armor. Now, for me, in my opinion, for Kuudra, it takes the excitement out of it, to be honest. You're not getting the god roll on the piece of armor that you want. You're not getting the disappointment of getting a magic, you know, like a Crimson god roll on an Aurora piece, you know? There's not that bit of magic there. But anyway, we can get past that. If you play Kuudra, I'm sure you're probably not the happiest. But I don't play Kuudra too often, so I'm going to move past that. And get to what the actual massive problem is. How people are reimbursed for god rolls. An interesting one. So if I take, for instance, this Molten Necklace. No, that's not a god roll, so I'm not going to take that one. Duh. If I take this Vanquish Blaze Belt, which is Veteran Vitality, which I would consider a god roll in this situation, but Hypixel doesn't. So first of all, we now have actual word from Hypixel which rolls are god rolls and aren't god rolls. Because before, it was kind of subjective and just left down to, I mean, the obvious god rolls were obviously, everyone considered god rolls, MP, MR on Aurora for the most part, Magic Find Veteran on Crimson, Lifeline, Mana Pool on Terra, but god rolls are kind of subjective and situational. Well, for instance, this Mana Pool, Mana Regeneration, and Molten Cloak is considered a god roll by Hypixel. As you can see underneath that, how it tells us how many shards we're going to get, it says god roll item plus 2 ankle feathers, or ankh feathers? Could you have made it a bit easier to pronounce? Anyway, what that means is we gain not only shards when we salvage or attribute transfer quote-unquote god rolls, we also get these feathers, which is the reimbursement. We'll get onto that in a moment. But the glaring issue there is there's obviously some rolls that some people consider god rolls and other people don't. So it's now taking the subjectiveness out of god rolls. I mean, it's irrelevant because there's not going to be god rolls really in the future anyway. Well, this is the main event. Now we have these feathers. What do you actually do with these feathers? Well, consume this feather to grant yourself progress in the RNG meter of your choice. Kinda seems cracked. Now, I've spent a load of these already because I had quite a few god roll, or quote-unquote god roll sets. Now, what this does is it's basically a credit. It's basically just a credit towards any RNG meter that you want. If you want to use one feather towards, I know, the Crystal Nucleus RNG meter, you'll gain, I think it's, 1.7% or 17,000 towards the RNG meter. If you want to put it towards the Floor 7 meter, you gain around about 2.8% per feather. Towards Warden Heart, you get 500k XP per feather, which is kind of crazy. That means basically to get a free Warden Heart, all you need is 8 feathers. There's a free 150, 160 mil, whatever it is nowadays. If you want to put it towards a Judgment Core, you can get 70k XP per feather, or around about 8%. Now, what this means is that all of these sought-after items, for instance, Necron Sandals, Judgment Cores, Warden Hearts, Divan's Alloys, you've got to remember the Experimentation Table too, which gets hit even harder. Each feather is 100k XP. And for instance, if I wanted to go for like an Enderman Slayer 7 like we've got there, that's just going to take 5 feathers. And that is pretty consistent across most tier 7 enchantments. Think about how many people out there have god roll sets. Think about how many people out there have multiple god roll sets. I believe the number of people, or the number of god roll Crimson sets out there is around about 32,000. Now sure, some people might be inactive. Some people might have multiple of those. But there's one thing that I know, and this is going to have it's going to have a huge impact on the economy. At first I thought, you know what, this is a little bit overpowered. You know, this seems almost too good to be true. But then when you actually look into it even more, and then you see just how easy it is to get those RNGs, you realise just how overpowered it actually is. It's a little bit too over the top. When I say a little bit, I think I mean quite a bit over the top. Now, don't get me wrong. It makes sense to be reimbursed. You know, some of these armor sets are worth billions of coins. 3, 4, 5 billion if you get a relatively maxed Crimson God Roll set. So it only makes sense that you're reimbursed pretty handsomely. However, I feel like this is maybe not the way to go about doing it. Think about how many people on the day the foraging update releases are going to be trying to sell Necron handles. Imagine how many people are going to undercut each other. There's going to be pages upon pages upon pages, 10s, 20, 50 pages of Necron handles. Imagine the price of the Terminator after everybody just spams the feathers, meter in the Judgment Core. How about the prices of Divan's drills? You name it. Just think about it. That is an insane amount of people with God Roll sets. Now you might be thinking, what are you going on about? You would have only got like 2 feathers before from that equipment piece. It's not even that bad. Well, that was only a 5/5 piece, okay? So I salvaged, I believe it was my 7/8 Crimson, which is God Roll. And I got a lot of feathers. And I had other God Roll sets to salvage too. So I think you've got to put this into perspective, because players who are early in game who may have one relatively low attribute God Roll, or maybe they don't have any God Rolls, will probably perceive that it doesn't really have any effect on them, this change at all. They may even think it might be good for them because the items that they want to buy are now cheaper. But at the same time, pretty much all those items that they're going to drop are also going to be cheaper as well. So it does have an impact on them. but it might just not really seem to affect them initially. Now, another thing that could be considered another solution is simply keeping attributes as they are right now. And what I mean by that is attributes that were previously in the game before this update on the alpha dropped. For instance, you know, attributes like mana pool, mana regen, veteran, vitality, dominance, lifeline, you name it. And keeping Kuudra the way it is too, because to be completely honest, the way I interpret it, and from what I've seen and what I've played from Kuudra on this update myself, I think it might kill it off a little bit. And I don't know how much. It might not, they might have found a way to make it work. But from what I've seen, I don't think it does. They could keep all the Kuudra and Crimson Isle attributes as they are, and then have all of these new attributes in the game, but as like passive hunting abilities, not call them attributes. Have them be attributes, and it wouldn't make any sense for them both to be attributes at the same time. I don't know. It's hard to say. But for the health and economy of the game, I don't see how there's a good outcome here. Now, this is not me saying, out crying because I'm not a fan of the attributes and, I just want to be angry. I'm not angry at all. I think the attribute system I like it. I know some people don't like it, but I quite like it. It's something different. Why not? Why not give it a change? Why not give it a go? I don't see the issue. But when it comes to reimbursing people for these God roll sets, I just simply don't see a good way of doing it. You could simply give people coins, but how do you put a value on these God roll sets, How do you do it? Because if, for instance, you have a 15-star Crimson God roll set 10-10, how much money do you get reimbursed for losing the attributes on that Crimson? It's hard to say. Another way it could be done would be by giving people the option to use these feathers, but the items that you obtain are untradeable. Soulbound. I'm not a massive fan of that idea because, most people with these big armor sets probably had them tradable. I just don't really see a better way of reimbursing people, that's the issue. But it'd be interesting to hear your guys' take on this, and see if you've got any other better solutions as to how they could actually reimburse people, because it's a tricky one. Now, there's every chance that, this system of reimbursing people with their feathers isn't actually the finished product. Of course, this is the alpha server, but this is all we've got to go off. But yeah, that's it. I'm not sure what else there really is to say. You just let me know what you think in the comments. I've got to say, although sometimes it doesn't really feel like you're playing Skyblock, I'm really enjoying the alpha server. I hope as many of you guys, as possible can get on and give it a good go before the alpha closes and, we inevitably get the update at some point. It's quite refreshing being on a newer version of Minecraft, even though I don't have all of my regular mods, texture pack, or shaders, which is honestly a bit weird. But anyway, that's going to be the end of today's video. I hope you all have enjoyed. If you have, make sure to leave a like, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you in the next one.